An age ago, the beating heart of our people was a king who knew only victory. He wanted nothing more than an honorable death on the battlefield. Yet, none could match him, and so he wandered the earth, becoming lost in time and tide. Then we too lost our honest purpose, while silk-clad men sat upon the throne. But tremble now, all cities that lay under the stars, for out of the shadows and mists of the land of promise, our courage has been rekindled, our heart has returned, and the world will burn.
All right, how's everybody doing tonight? Welcome back to Comic Book Team Up with me and John's Longbox. My guest today is John's Longbox and me. We're just going to talk about what both of us are doing in 2025. Normally we have a guest on, but this week I thought that we would just talk what we're doing in 2025 like we did on John's live stream last week because I had so much fun last week, and we're just going to do it again. Any questions, put them in the comments and we will get to them. Let's see who's here. Jewel is here. Vaz is here. John is here, of course. We have Joni, Manny, Michael, Pedro, everybody. Our normal crew is here, so thank you very much. We haven't had a stream for a couple of weeks just because of Christmas and New Year's. So let's jump right in, John. I know that you talked about this on your stream last week, but tell anybody who wasn't there last week, what are your plans for the Patriarch in 2025?
Oh, well, first off, looking at myself, I realized I need a trim and a haircut. So that's the first thing. 2020, I look like a crazy person. Second off, the Patriarch, for those of you who don't know, is the main character of my comic, Heroic Tales. Issue 2 is about 40% done already. We're going to start the campaign. I've just read, there's 2 stories in my comic. The Mary Sue story, the second story is finished, and Renzo is doing the Patriarch story. As soon as we get about 5 or 6 pages of that done, I'm going to get a trailer made up and then start building the campaign page. So I wanted to launch in January, but I've been looking at everybody's campaigns. It doesn't seem like January is a good month to launch a campaign.
Yeah, everybody's paying off their bills from Christmas.
Right. Yeah. So I'll wait till February.
Same with me. I've been doing, well, I almost started last night. I should have started, but I got sidetracked. I was going to do the trailer or part of the trailer for Fade to Blue because I thought of a really neat idea of what to do with it. And I thought to myself, I should start on that right away. But, you know, it's everything is always taking a little bit longer than it should.
Who do you do your trailers yourself or do you hire somebody?
I usually do them myself. I don't know. I really I really enjoy putting them together and coming up with concepts to put them together. I'm sure someone else would do probably a much more professional job and be quicker at it, but I like doing it.
Anybody would do a more professional job than me. So Kyle Prometheus sent me my trailer that I've been using for Heroic Tales, you know, that snappy, jazzy, you know, Invincibles, Incredibles kind. So I'm just going to pay him this thing. He just did it for me for free. So I was like, all right, your audition worked. I'm hiring you forever. So, you know, as soon as I get a couple of pages, I'll send it to him and see what he can do.
Tony has a question here really quick. He says, what's my thoughts on the Neil Gaiman situation? Here's my thoughts on it, Tony, and everybody else that's commenting in the comments. Number 1, I wouldn't be surprised. Number 2, guilt. I mean, what is it? accusations don't mean guilt. So, I don't want to jump on a bandwagon because someone made accusations, but at the same time, it would not surprise me just because of some of the things that have gone out there. So I just like to steer clear of it until, there's something a little more concrete than accusations. Anyway,
Are you okay if I say something about it?
you go right ahead, John.
Yeah, I personally don't like Neil Gaiman. I love the Sandman, so I've just laid all my cards on the table. I questioned him about the casting in a TV show, and he told me I was a racist. I was like the biggest champion for the Sandman series in the 90s, and now all of a sudden I'm a racist. And I threw his own words back in his face where Neil Gaiman himself said, if a Batman movie comes out and Batman's a guy in a yellow trench coat with a pet bat, that's not Batman. And I can understand why people are upset when they don't see their characters accurately portrayed on the screen like they are in the comics. And then he has Death. I'm sure the actress is a wonderful person. I'll give her the benefit of the doubt. But the character of Death, they're black and white. It's literally like a dichotomy. They're not Caucasian. They're white like alabaster, and they're black like ebony. You know what I mean? Cast a black woman, put her in white makeup. It's not, they have a black woman playing Gamora who's green. That doesn't matter. So anyway, I said, Neil, you of all people know that your characters are black and white. It's a statement, whatever. So I'm just laying my cards on the table. So I don't like this person. However, accusations, haven't we learned after Ed Piskor, accusations could lead, you know what I mean? Like, this is my standard. Anybody could get accused of anybody of anything, even though my instincts tell me it's true. If you run, did these people, did they run to the media first, or did they run to the police first? And that's always been my criteria. Like, oh, Trump did so-and-so. It's like, oh yeah, but you never went to the police, but you went to like Weekly World News. Like, I don't believe you. And the same with Biden. I don't particularly like Biden, but if people accuse Biden of stuff, there better be a police report. So I don't know. I didn't read the article because it sounds really gross, and I really, really don't want to hear this kind of stuff anymore. The older I get, the more I want to see sunshine and roses and puppies, So my thoughts on it is, just like everybody else, my standard is there a police report? Is there, is the authorities getting involved? If not, then it's he said, she said, even when I don't like the person, because I want to be consistent. So how is that? Was that okay?
That's great. That's kind of where I'm going with it as well. Vaz here just brought up an interesting point that I'm going to piggyback off of. The idea of a male feminist, to me, honestly, is someone you got to watch out for.
Yes. I was going to say that, but then I didn't want to get too controversial. Like, Neil, you're going to get hung on your own pretard over here. Believe all women. You know what I mean? Like, you've been preaching that for 10, 15 years, and now women are saying stuff. Should we believe them, or do you retract this ridiculous statement? Because women can lie too. And I would also like to point out, again, I'm not defending Neil Gaiman. The guy really hurt my feelings. So not that I want anybody to go to jail because of accusations, but you guys know what I'm saying. He's also going through a horrible divorce to a horrible woman. And what a coincidence that these things are coming out now, so I don't know. All I know is what happened to Ed Piskor should make us all just be like, okay, let's sit and wait and see what the facts are. I'm not, that I guess that's all I have to say.
Yeah, that's why it popped up on Twitter, I think Monday, and I went with something else. Usually I just post one thing on Twitter in the morning. That's has come from my feed, and I went with the D&D one where they're showing in the D&D rule book the guy in the wheelchair, the two black characters that have been race swapped with shaved heads, and the gay guy. And I said, what would happen if the DM killed one of these characters? He'd be called something phobic all over the place.
Vaz says, John, have you managed to convince RJ to go play a game of D&D with you during the holidays? Yes, RJ came over. We played Dungeons and Dragons. He played a cleric of Lady Gaga in a wheelchair. It was really good. He didn't want to hurt the orcs. He wanted to befriend the orcs and understand the orcs. And he got shot 17 times with war bows and perished within 8 seconds, and then had to roll up a new character. So RJ, I think he learned his lesson.
That's the one thing that you got to learn, I think, when playing role-playing games is your character, don't get too attached to them. Just don't.
I say that to my friends. This is, the starter wife or the starter home. I said, this is your starter character. I had one friend who just like, he was like, I make up. He wrote like backstory and started telling me everything about it. And I'm like, you realize you're just gonna die, It's just, so come up with the backstory for your next character.
All right, so really quickly, I want to show off this cover in the background here. This is the cover for Thomas Valiant #1. Thomas Valiant #2.
Oh,
We're
cool.
we're still working out a few kinks, Nick Axe and I, for this cover, but this is the de facto cover for Thomas Valiant #2. If you remember anybody, we're talking about 2025 and what's coming in 2025. This is Thomas Valiant #2. We are probably halfway done, Renzo and I, with the art for the main story. There's a secondary story that we still have to deal with, but if anybody remembers from Thomas Valiant #1 and from Valiant Heroes, Disc is going a little bit insane because of the way her powers work. So we're going to continue on that storyline, as you can see with the cover of Thomas Valiant #2. This is one of the things coming in the near future.
Oh, cool. When did you say the campaign will start?
I couldn't say, John. I don't have any fixed date on it yet because I have the colorist doing the first 10 pages so I can post them on the page. Then I have to have him do the posters as well. And I have a different fellow doing, because Renzo did, I think, 4 out of the 5 posters. So those are done, but the colorist has to color them. Whereas the 5th poster, which is Artemis, is being done by the same guy who did the Cardinal poster for the Valiant Heroes #1, which is the greatest selling poster I've had. So he does the colors on that, but he's not done with he does his everything for his own stuff, but he likes to, I don't know, do everything, like put shading in, everything like that. He's still not done. So I'm waiting on a couple of things like that so that the entire page can be put up for Thomas Valiant #2 before we do that. However, I think that Fade to Blue will probably be going up before then as well. I talked to Arctoons to put it up there on their website, and they said, yeah, sure, no problem. But then I thought to myself, I wonder if I could do a campaign where I only sold it digitally, and I could try that out on Indiegogo or Fund My Comic and see how that worked. Because again, the whole point of Fade to Blue is we're pumping these out one after another. They're normal floppy size, but I want them to be digital format now. Maybe in the future when I have like 5, 6 done, we'll do an actual hard copy. But I want people who have kept on saying to me, I would like something digital because I can't afford all of the shipping and everything else. Yeah. I want them to have something from the 4th Age digitally that's brand new and that can be put out as a PDF for you to own. Now, here's the questions for the chat. If I'm going to put out by myself the Fade to Blue, which is digital only, do you think it would be a good idea to have 2 tiers? One where you could go someplace, which would cost less, of course, to just read the book and not actually download it, and another one where you could download it and actually have it as a PDF, which would cost a little bit more, not a whole lot. Would it be sensible to have both of those tiers or just pick one?
That's interesting. I'd be curious to hear the answer to that too. I want to ask you, you said you had posters. I got a message today from Heather Velli. She's, we talk on Twitter a few times, and she has her own comic campaign.
Right.
She just said that she got her posters. That was one of her tiers. You could buy a poster for her comic. And it's heavy paper. And she's like, when I fold it, it creases.
Yeah.
Do you have any do you have any wisdom to impart? And I said, yeah, I stay away from posters. Like I don't know about you, but I can't stand a poster that's folded, but unless you get a round tube, which is, I guess, expensive to ship. Yeah. So I said, my advice would be no posters, just prints, maybe the same size as a comic, maybe a little bigger so they can fit in a Gemini mailer. So you do posters. What do you do? And any advice?
Well, the advice I would have for that is, for my first campaign, I had them do the posters and they folded them inwards so that the back was just showing on both sides, and it did crease them, and people were a little bit upset. But I thought to myself, well, they got to be creased because I have to put them in the mailer, right? There's no way I can do it any other way. But I talked to my printer for when we were doing the Valiant Heroes #1, which was this last campaign, and I said, is there any way we can do it so that we don't crease them? And so what they did, honestly, all they did was fold them the other way. And in folding them the other way, they didn't crease. They still had a crease, but there's no white crease. You know what I mean? There's no broken white crease through it. So you want to put it up in in on the wall or in something. The guy complaining, which I completely admit he was right on this. He wanted to put it in a frame and say, there's a big crease in it. What am I going to do? I can see his point of view. The only other thing I could think to do is that for Crom the Destroyer, instead of doing posters, I did posters as well for that, but you also have oversized cards which are the size of a comic book, and therefore they will not be folded in any way, and they'll be a heavier card stock. So if you want to put those,
that's what I suggested. Like that. I didn't do that either. I just did a comic book and a card and a beer glass, but I like to do something different. But from what's his name, Zach from Diversity in Comics, he just threw in posters. I never ordered them, but he threw in posters with all of his comics, and they're still folded up. And I have a short box full of all the extra stuff, bookmarks and whatever, all this swag, because again, I'm not trying to hurt anybody's feelings or whatever, but first off, I don't have room to hang up a poster. Second off, it's creased. But Rini from the fourth age, Rini from Fiendish, she had the cloth poster, so it came folded, but the folds come out after a while. So I wonder, that would be she made a cloth poster of a map of her world, and so did Rob Geronimo from Blood Realm. So I was thinking about that. I want to do a map of Science City, my city, but would it look weird on cloth? Blueprints aren't on cloth, but old ancient fake worlds are cool on cloth. But I don't know, maybe like a cloth patriarch or something like that, because we could do that oversized. I don't know. What does the chat think?
I'm actually, for Crom the Destroyer, we're doing one of the cloth maps, right?
Right. That works perfect.
Yeah. So that's one of the things. Again, I went to my printer and I said, can you, because they do screen printing as well, which is, on t-shirts and stuff like that. So I said, can you do a poster basically on a piece of cloth? And they said, yeah, no problem. We still haven't done any tests on it yet because we're way behind in Crom the Destroyer, and I'm looking more towards getting the book done so we can ship those out as quickly as possible. Although I'm actually looking now to probably get a fulfillment service to do this, and if anybody's wondering, to do Crom the Destroyer and any upcoming books. I might get RJ from Critical Blast or someone like that to do it, just because
I hope I'm successful enough that I need him.
Well, I'm not successful enough to need him right now. I'll probably be paying for it, but at the same time, getting the books printed in Canada is actually cheaper, but getting them shipped from Canada costs a whole lot more.
Oh yeah, I keep forgetting. Yeah,
literally the price for postage over the last week, since I don't know, they're trying to pay for this strike, went up like 40%.
Oh,
it's
so what do you
ridiculous?
You get all the shipment just sent to RJ and have him ship it from wherever.
Well, I don't know if I can do that. He might have to be in contact with his printer as well. I'll have to, I don't know. RJ is the only one I know who does this right now,
and he does such a good job. That would be really smart. I keep forgetting you're in Canada. Jewel has a great comment over here. The only things that are important are God, Heroic Tales 2, and Thomas Valiant 2. So thank you for that comment. That made my day.
I'm trying to put up some stuff in the background, but I can't get it up. I was going to show a part of the Artemis poster, but I can't get it to come up in a format that'll fit this because it's too big, unless I put it sideways, which is not going to work. But someone was saying, I don't know who it was here. It was Oscar saying digital is the future. Yeah, digital. I was thinking, Oscar, as well. I said this on John's channel last week. I'm just building out the world of the Fourth Age. So I'm jumping all over time zones and everything else, as in to say, Crown of the Destroyer is prehistory. Fade to Blue is 1930s. I was also thinking of doing basically a webcomic of a very early, say, 1910s stuff that has a lot to do with Egyptology and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, cool.
And I don't know I have the story for that. It wouldn't take me very long to write it out, but I would need an artist. So I'm thinking of trying to pull in from many sources as possible. Always thinking about Nick Axe and his idea of, top of funnel, right? Pull people in from every which way.
Right. Oh, just to tease people, Thomas Valiant appears in a panel in Heroic Tales 2, but he's not really in the comic, but he appears. I'm being a little vague on purpose, just to tease people.
He'll be a puddle of goo on the sidewalk. There you
go. Yeah, he's going to step it up. A couple of people asking us about Diamond. How do you feel about Diamond? They're not filing for bankruptcy. They're filing for like protection. It's Chapter 11. Remember, Marvel Comics filed for Chapter 11 and bounced back. So it's not all doom and gloom. But
I really don't. I haven't heard anything about it. I really haven't been following that much comic news.
Diamond Comics, filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. Okay. I don't know. How is my feeling about it? In the 90s, in the early 90s, when I worked at the comic book store, I met Steve Geppy. We went to retailer conventions and stuff, talked about, and I just got a bad feeling. I can't base it on anything. It's just, I always got the feeling that they were a monopoly from, like, I hate to say it, like mob connections or something like that. They just rubbed me the wrong way. So again, here's another, I don't particularly like them, but I can't prove anything. I can't, these are all just based on me casting aspersions. But I do think Diamond, like, it costs comics to get so expensive. What do they take? 50% of the cover price, and all they were was a middleman. They didn't really contribute. So I don't know. I think if they go bank, maybe other distributors will rise up and we'll have competitive, and maybe it'll be a good thing. That's what I'm hoping. Unfortunately, I think that comic book stores are going to suffer. Poor innocent, guy who just has opened up a store as an extension of his hobby. I think they're the people that are gonna. I don't think Marvel or DC are gonna suffer. They seem like they don't even care about poor sales.
Yeah, no, it doesn't seem like that at all. Although I'll give you a very wild sidetrack that I was thinking about the other day is the fact that everybody knows I live in a cabin in the woods, right? Cabin in the woods that I built myself. And I was thinking back to where all these building techniques started to come from, and it's basically came out of like late 60s, early 70s. And when I matched that up with economic instability, they just overlapped completely, right? And I thought to myself, you know what? There's probably going to be another boom of alternative building techniques pretty soon, just because nobody can afford a house and stuff like that. It's the same idea, I think, with Diamond right now. Diamond is a dinosaur that came out of basically the rise of Marvel, and when it's time for it to die, unfortunately, but we're going to have a struggle for really weird ways of trying to get comics out to people, and hopefully it's going to produce some very interesting and alternative methods of getting things out to comic stores and to people.
Yeah, Mark Miller, it sounds like I'm bragging, but he was on my channel and he said something. I think Mark Miller is very observant of patterns, and he said we had 30 years of the newsstand and we had 30 years of direct market. And he goes, I think it's the next 30-year cycle is going to start. Now, a couple of people rolled their eyes at that, but I don't know. I'm a dummy. I'll take Mark Millar. Maybe this is the beginning of a new era of comics. Maybe it'll be good. Who knows? I don't think comics will ever go away. People just like comic books, but it's harder and harder to find them.
Yeah, definitely. I just honestly, whenever I travel and I go to places where I have lived, I always think to myself, this is where I bought that, and this is where I bought that, and this is where I usually would get my comics when I was, 10, 12, 13, whatever. And, that's where my memories go to, is where I got my comics. And, there is nothing like that anymore.
Right.
There's one store around me, and it's not a place that I want to go to. That's it.
Yeah, there's 2 comic book stores within walking distance to me. One of them just ticked me off. Like my friend Mark comes to visit. He lives in South Jersey. Like once a year, he just like, let's if we both happen to be off work, he'll drive out here. He'll spend the night, and we just hit all the comic book stores, and he looks through every box, and just so we'll spend hours in a store, and he'll grab a big stack. So we went to this one store, and he got a Marvel Superheroes 15, the first appearance of Captain Marvel, and he had a big stack, and then he brought them to the guy. The guy goes, "Oh, those, you can't buy those." He's like, "Well, what do you mean?" He goes, "They're part of sets." He goes, "They were in these boxes." He goes, "Yeah, but I make more money if I sell the whole set, because then I get rid of comics that nobody wants." And he goes, "But I don't want the comics. These are the comics I want." So he was like, "Yeah, but it's part of a set." And it's like, then you should have like wrapped them together and said this was in a set, So we spent like hours in the store, and so Mark was like, "Here you go, buy." And it's literally around the block, and I haven't been there since. It was just like a perfect example of like a store that just like, I'm going to go out of my way to not sell comics. So.
Yeah, that's the problem with so many. I don't know. It's all the way from Marvel and DC to your comic shop right now. I don't actually want to sell you comics. I want to sell you something else. I don't know. Shake your head. And the one guy that was out there that I could trust, I didn't like him. I didn't like his politics. He would go off on tangents in his store and all that kind of stuff. I didn't care. He sold me comics. Right. He knew I liked comics. He knew what kind of comics I liked. He would set good comics that I liked on the counter when I was coming in. So he was a good guy, and his place just went under because, again, no one wants to just buy comics anymore, unfortunately.
It's funny. I work with a guy who runs a Facebook group and talks to comic book creators and does, and he's like, I was like, "Oh, so what, I love comics. I've been copying. Oh, what do you got?" "I haven't bought a comic in 20 years, he says. I'm like, "Oh, but he's still he still knows what's going on, stuff like that. But he's just like, I'm not," he goes, comics are bad. He goes, he just likes the idea of comics, but he doesn't buy them. I'm like, all right, whatever, RJ lives in a cabin in the woods next to the cave where Bigfoot lives. Yes, RJ lives in the cabin in the woods. Here's the funny thing that RJ's not telling you is that he didn't build the bathroom. So RJ, when they say when a bear poop in the woods, the updated phrase should be, "Does RJ poop in the woods?" And the answer is yes.
I built the entire. I'll just put this way. When I say cabin in the woods, I do mean cabin in the woods. I like to think of it more as a cottage, like an English cottage in the woods. But for North Americans, you just think of cabin in the woods. However, that being said, I did build every last part of it. Me and my brother. So yeah, it's not just we threw up the walls. It was, we put in the plumbing, we put in the septic, we put in the electrical, we put in everything. So it's a homemade jobby from top to bottom.
So did you help your brother build his house?
No. Not at all. My brother is always doing. My brother's the strangest person in the world, even compared to me, because he's so smart that he makes me look like a dullard completely.
So he's what's Sherlock Holmes's brother's name?
Mycroft.
Yeah, so he's Mycroft to your Sherlock.
Pretty much. But the thing is that he has a degree in particle physics. Wow. And he can teach it, and every once in a while he does, but he would rather do carpentry work and odd jobs.
He's Ron Swanson from Parks and Recreation, right? Oh, that's cool. There's something satisfying about working with your hands and building stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
Like when my fence is falling down, I replaced. When I first moved in, we didn't have gates in the front, so there was like kids just walking through our backyard because an old man lived here, and they would walk through our backyard to go around the block rather than walking all the way around the block. We're in the middle of the block, so it was a shortcut. So I was like, all right, I gotta put up a gate, and I repaired the slot. It was just fun, making a fence, building a gate. You know, I got a tree in front of my house, a huge tree, and we cut a bunch of limbs off. But I think it's going to be another couple of years before we got to cut the tree down. I love this tree, but I want to keep the stump like 10 feet in the air and actually carve a wooden throne. That's how big this tree is, you know, and just make like an Odin throne on the front of my house, just carved out of, you know, the people in my neighborhood are going to think I'm a maniac, you know.
A little piece of advice to you, John. If it's a big tree, when it starts growing shoots from basically the bottom of the tree again, if it starts putting up shoots, take it down because it's starting to rot from the inside.
Okay. It's not doing that. They just had a couple of limbs that were just huge, unbelievably huge, like over the house, and they didn't look bad until they were on the ground. And I was like, these were like hanging over my house. You know, I you know, when I say that it might come down just because it's so big and these limbs are so big. You know, we just paid 10 grand for a new roof. Yeah, I live in Arkansas, where mathematician lives in trailer homes and fixed cars.
Oh, good to know.
You know what's funny is I used to, when I lived in Queens, I used to go to a game night every Monday night, just play board games with people, and the rule was no politics, and it lasted for years and years and years. But one guy was always trying to bring up politics because he knew me and him were like diametrically opposed, and I was just like, "You're not going to get me. This is game night. This is game." And then he came in all depressed one day, and he was just like, "Oh man," I'm like, "What's about?" He's a Shakespeare professor. He teaches Shakespeare at 3 different colleges, and he's like, "Yeah, they got these Shakespeare professors from India." He goes, "And they all teach one class." He goes, "So they pay them less. There's no benefits, and you know I'm only teaching in one school." He's like, "I lost 2/3 of my income," and I'm like, "Oh, welcome to the Republican Party, dude." You know, I said, "You made fun of me complaining about all the illegals coming in, construction workers, but it wasn't until they started becoming Shakespeare professors before you cared." You know, and
that's funny because I got an opposite story for that has a connection to my brother. He was teaching, I think it was Boston College, somewhere down there. He was saying, you got all these people from all over the world coming in and learning physics. But he said, most of the Americans would just come in late and not pay attention and not do the assignments. But the guys over there from India, they were on time. They were doing the work. They were putting in every last inch of effort that they could in order to learn particle physics. So, you never know. You look for merit. Look for merit.
That's like, me and my wife, she's Canadian. We talk politics a lot. And she's just like, what happens if Trump wins the election and they block him and, Biden never leaves office? I said, nothing's going to happen. She goes, what do you mean nothing's going to happen? I said, Americans are just going to accept it. I said, I'm not going to go grab a gun and fight. I said, I got a mortgage to pay. But, as much as we complain, it's too comfortable.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I know exactly. Because I got Canadian friends who are like, what happens if Trump does this and does that? I'm going, he's not doing any of that. That's ridiculous. All he's doing is stirring up people's feelings because he wants everybody to be nationalistic. Everybody in the entire world is trying to be international minded. And he's reminding them, if you don't protect your borders, you're not a nation. So that's all he's doing. And I'm saying to them, this is not going to happen. I'm shaking my head going, no, he's doing this to get a rise out of people.
Right. And then this same guy, this college professor who's lamenting, and he's like, this is going to cause a revolution and blah, blah, blah. And I said, you better hope there isn't one. And he's like, why? I said, because all the conservatives are the guys with the guns and the guys who could fix cars and motors and electricians. I said, all you liberal college professors and HR departments, I said, you guys are going to have 2 jobs in post-revolutionary America. And he's like, what? I go, either forgive my language, RJ, to be fucked or to be food. And I said, and you ain't pretty.
Reminds me of there was I can't remember who wrote it. It was a novel written, I think it was like the early 90s or something like that. It's called The Faculty of Useless Knowledge. And it was all about a guy who was a law professor right before the the revolution in the USSR, and overnight all of his knowledge just became completely useless.
Yeah.
So he had nothing to do after that.
Yeah. There was there's a comic called Crossed, and it's like a plague came and made everybody like psychotic murderers and stuff like that. There was one heavyset guy. He was just like, yeah, I'm a doctor and I know what to do. We got to get to Washington D.C. because there's a cabal there that's hidden, and we'll go in there and they have the antidote. Blah blah blah. And he was just had a group of like conservative rednecks and everything like that, just protecting him. And then when they finally got there, he admitted he was like a humanities professor who just knew he was useless and was leading everybody along just to stay alive. Like, all right, the skills that are just luxuries in a post-apocalyptic society. Shakespeare professor, it's nice, but can you wire up a house? Can you build a fence? Can you fix a car? Can you grow food? Me, I would starve to death in a wheat field. I wouldn't know how to turn wheat into food. So but at least I'll wire up your house. I'll fix your solar panels. So maybe I can barter with somebody. But learning about Horatio and Othello, sorry, we got to do.
Yeah, well, that's again. I'm with you about nothing's going to change. It's that
Right.
I was always thinking to myself, half in the back of my mind for the last, I don't know, 30, 40 years, like what happens if this goes down or what happens if that happens? And I was always buying stuff and doing things. And I'm like, yeah, nothing's ever going to change. I'm just going to live my own life and I'm done. Right. I like to grow. I have my own garden and my own greenhouses and stuff. I can grow a lot of my own food. And if quite honestly, if the entire thing collapsed, I'd be fine. I mean, my food, yeah, no problem. I'll go down. Like I live in the woods, but the ocean is like 30 yards from me, right? So I go down and get fish and shellfish, and I can hunt and everything else. So I don't care, but nothing's ever going to change. That's never going to.
People in India, they know extreme poverty. I dated a girl in college whose mother was from Ireland, and she grew up in the same time and town as that Cormac McCarthy, and her uncle and aunt. My ex-girlfriend's uncle and aunt starved to death in Ireland. That's how bad it was. So like, I'm struggling to lose weight. So like, if Biden doesn't release power in the whatever martial laws decreed, I'm just like, wow. No, I got this comic book room, and I'm not going to go fight. We're not that bad yet to actually do anything.
Not even close. I mean, I was talking to you earlier before we started here, John. You might know where this is coming from, but I was talking to my mother just last week, and she was telling me about growing up, right? And my mother grew up in a place, and I'm not that old, but she grew up in a place with no running water and no electricity, nothing to drive. There was no cars or anything like that. It was just horse and wagon and all that kind of stuff. And that was everybody where she lived. And she was telling me about what she would have to do when she was like 6 or 7. She'd get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and start the fire and make breakfast for everybody because they're going out to the barn to work. And then she said, I got the easy job because I was doing this and everybody else was out in the barn doing that. And I'm thinking, yeah, I got it pretty easy. I got it really easy.
Yeah, my Irish grandmother grew up in Ireland, and she never learned to read. When she came to America when she was 35. And at that point she was set in her ways or whatever. So when my mother was, and then she had 5 kids after 35, she would ask my mother, "Do you want to go to school today?" Like she didn't see the value in school. She went without school. And I remember asking her to read me a book. She would fake it, and I thought she was just being silly. But so yeah, things were different. Now I had a foreman that was a big hunter, and he only lives a town away from me. And he took his kids out to hunt deer and like taught them how to field dress a deer. And and like he showed me photographs of like him and his son like standing there covered in blood. It looked like 2 serial killers. And I was like, oh, you're crazy. And now I'm like, my father used to hunt. He never taught me how to I would shoot a deer and just be like, is this part edible? What do I do next? You know what I mean? I would ruin the deer, you know? I dated a girl in Albuquerque and she used to hunt turkeys and stuff like that. And I was like, that's gross. And she's like, what do you think that's coming from? Yeah.
I'm just trying to get some background here and see if I can put up some stuff for my Artemis project, which is
yes, let's talk about
projects.
Yes, so I have Heroic Tales 2, probably in February launching. It's about 40% done. I have another comic called Eddie is Doomed. That's Oscar, who's in the chat right now, just showed me page 1. It's so exciting to see. That was a script that I wrote like 2 years ago, and I was working with Tonic Mole, and then I told Oscar about it, and then Oscar started drawing it's supposed to be about a comic book collector that he's 35 years old and his father's like, I'm retiring, you got to move out. And he's like, oh my God, talk about having an easy life. So Eddie is doomed. He's got to move out. And then he goes to the comic book store and he finds out like the Doomed Earth is being released, which is the Crisis on Infinite Earths. So his continuity that he grew up reading is ending. So he can't even find solace in his comic book collection because you're ruining my childhood. So poor Eddie is just doomed. Talk about a spoiled guy. He's got to get his own apartment at 35, and the comic book continuity is ending. So, but Oscar just did character designs for all of these goofy superheroes, and I'm like, I got to expand the superhero stories. These are too good. So, those are my 2 projects this year.
Here's a couple of panels from the Artemis book, which is probably going to come out very late this year, if not early next year, because we're going to probably put almost 100 pages into this. We haven't finalized the last chapter of it, but working with a fellow actually who lives in Tokyo. Cool. He's a manga artist, and so it's going to be a manga book. Obviously, he's actually teaching me a whole lot about manga. It's like I've read manga and I've watched a lot of anime, but I never picked up on a lot of the subtle differences between American comics and manga. The little things, like we did a flashback scene within the first, I think it was 10 pages, and I said, how would you do this? Because flashback scene in American comics would be rounded edges to your panels to let the reader know that it's a flashback scene. And he said, well, if you're doing it in a manga style, it would have black for its background behind the panels, and then a shading over top of the panels itself. And I went, okay, well, let's do that. And so we did both of them. Basically, we made sure the panels are rounded edges, and we have the manga style as well. So I'm trying to appeal to 2 audiences at once here, taking his advice, and we're putting everything we can in this book. And it does, again, has a manga style, to be sure. I mean, this guy lives in Tokyo and he draws manga. So, hopefully, once again, just like the other projects that are scheduled to possibly come out this year, we're looking at trying to pull in different people from different avenues of comics to bring them into the Fourth Age world.
That is cool. How did you find your artist?
Really scouring Twitter, because just really quickly, there was another manga artist that did the very short story for Artemis that was part of the graphic novel of the Valiant Heroes #1, and everybody was saying, what the heck is this? Why is this 8-page no word story in as a backup story? Well, it's because we're starting an entire book, so I just wanted to introduce the character. But yeah, I've been scouring Twitter for a long time to try to find an artist that was fluent enough in English, but a good manga artist who, because the fellow who did the stuff in the background right now, he is a manga artist, but not really. He lives in, he's a manga art company, and they are from the Philippines, I do believe, if I remember correctly. But I was looking for someone who, because the Philippines, again, it's like the difference between American comics and British comics. You can get manga from Japan, and then you can get manga from Korea or the Philippines, right, or stuff like that. There's a difference. There are differences. So I wanted someone who knew the ins and outs of Japanese manga, so that we could at the very least, I don't know if you remember those innovation books like My and stuff like that came out in the 90s.
I remember those. My the
right?
Psychic Girl. Yeah.
Yeah, the Psychic Girl. So they were manga that were published originally in Japan, and then they were flipped around and published in American style floppies within the 90s, stuff like that.
Yeah. That was my introduction to manga. I think the very first one was Lone Wolf and Cub.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget this one guy who he was just annoying. He was older than me. He would come in, and I remember he's picking up Lone Wolf and Cub, and he's looking at it, and he just looks at me with like a face of disgust and goes, "This guy's just trying to rip off Frank Miller." All right. You ever meet people where you just like don't even argue with them? Just
yeah.
you're right. Yeah.
Quite honestly, John, most of the people I find like that are at the comic store, or they used to be at the comic store. It's like, yeah, I'm going this way. I'm just going to go look at these boxes over here.
I'll never forget that same guy. I won't even tell you what his nickname was, but he had a 12-year-old boy cornered up against the wall, and he's like, "Jim Shooter just got fired. Isn't that the greatest thing? Isn't that great? Jim Shooter's he's finally gone. Jim Shooter." And the kid was just like, "Dude, I don't know who Jim Shooter is." It's like, so I was like, leave him alone. The kid just wants to buy his Spider-Man comic book and go home. You know what I mean? 12-year-old kid. I didn't know Jim, who ran Marvel Comics when I was 12. I just knew who Spider-Man was. Yeah.
Here's a good thing. Jewel is saying here, I was going to bring this up before. Jewel says, I prefer flashbacks, just say 3 years ago and stuff. Yes, we could do that. But here's what I was thinking about when I was reading your book for Heroic Tales, John. It's very, very 80s in the style of storytelling.
Right.
Because I was saying this to John a little while ago after I read it. It's that there are a couple of things in there where he and I, as normal comic book readers, especially from the 80s, we get it. But I don't know. It could be, but I don't know if people would get it today. Just a couple of panel transitions, like 2 or 3. That's it. And then I started thinking about that over the last week, and I thought to myself, I'm watching these old movies, like old 80s movies and stuff like that, right? And I do follow a bunch of people on YouTube, like Yumi in the movies. They do older movies and just comment on them, things like that. 80s stuff is very much in that direction. I don't need to explain too much. If you can't get it, just move on, right?
Yeah, it's funny that I had somebody review my comic, and this woman is new to comics, and she made an assumption about my comic. She created this assumption, and then I didn't live up to her assumption, so she was disappointed. There's nothing I could do about that. But in her review, she said, "Yeah, the story made sense. I could follow everything. She's like, I like the coloring, I like the art, the whatever." But when she said I could follow along everything and it made sense, that was to me the best compliment, because I'm very harsh with disjointed, bad storytelling comics. And writing that script, again, I'm still a rookie. I have one published comic, but writing that script illuminated something in my mind, that comic books are stories through art, and the words supplement the art. Like I was like, oh, Patriarch on panel 2 is doing this because I wrote him doing this. This is part of the story. Like I don't know how you write your scripts, but I write my script in like panel 1. The Patriarch is hovering a couple of feet in the air above the bank. All the bank robbers are looking up at him. One person's in the background pointing to him. There's another person, that was all. And then the dialogue is just the Patriarch, the security guard says, you know what I mean? So I only wrote one word in that panel, but I really wrote 100 words in that panel that was translated into a picture. But that picture told the story. I could have taken the Patriarch out. I just wrote the Patriarch because I just wanted the reader to know that was the Patriarch and the cool logo that Nick X designed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, that, and like, so my I guess what a roundabout way I'm saying, like the Chris Claremont very verbose method of writing comics is kind of self-indulgent, because we write, you do the same thing I do. You hire somebody else to take your script to turn it to. We write everything in that panel, and then whoever you hire as the artist translates those words into beautiful art. So I don't need 6,000 words in a panel, because there really are 6,000 words in the panel. It's called artwork, you know. So what one guy said that this was a weird comment, but I understand what he was saying. He reviewed it. He says, my dialogue was so perfect, it might as well have been written by ChatGPT. Kind of hurt my feelings a little bit, but like I wanted to keep as little words, like what Mike Barron said, in a fight, you don't just have like a soliloquy. You're just like, stop that, get over here. Ow, that hurts. What are you, a jerk? You know what I mean? That's the way people, if they even say that much in a fight. I've been in a couple of fist fights. I don't break out into a soliloquy. So I kind of wanted to keep, you know, as little words as possible, more art to tell the story. But anyway, what you said, like transitions, I was just happy that the only person I know for a fact who's just new into comic books read my story and got it. Now, here's my little thing. If my sister read my comic and it made sense to my sister, because she hates comic books, but she read it because it's mine. You know what I mean? So I kept grilling her. Did it make sense? Were you confused? She was like, no. I was like, so tell me the whole story, but don't read it to me. So she was like, you know what I mean? Like, okay, all right. I did my job. You know, whether you like it or not, that's something else. So I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, I've actually, let's look at this book here again. This is the panel 1, which is splash page from Artemis, the book that's going to be coming out. Now, I'm experimenting with the Marvel method when I'm doing this book, because for the first 10 pages, I gave the artist, you know, my full script. I said, this is the full script. This is what I want it to look like. And so we started to work together, and we were going back and forth. And he said, okay, can you give me 30 pages at once? And I said, not unless you want the bare bones. And he said, give me the bare bones. So I gave him 30 pages of 1 line, 1 to 2 lines per panel. And usually for manga, it's only 4 to 6 panels per page. So, and no dialogue whatsoever. So I'm going to write the dialogue after he does all of the stuff. So what I'm experimenting with is the fact that I know that I only have a couple of books under my belt, and I need to refine all my things, but I have so many ideas for so many stories right now. I need to start going faster. And the thing is with going faster is that, again, I can't exhaust my audience because they only have a limited amount of money. But at the same time, that's why I want to do so many different formats right now. It's like there are different kinds of audiences, different ways you can support these things and read them and all that kind of stuff. But I want to tell more stories. And I think the 80s way of telling stories is exactly that, is that they weren't spamming these things out like they are today, but they didn't have a whole lot of time in order to put these out there. And so you got a truncated storytelling that was, if you can't follow it along, just keep on moving. Just keep on moving, right? It'll make sense. And that's the kind of thing I want.
This is the original script for Eddie is Doomed, and it's 8 pages. It's 8 pages, but it's Marvel style. So it's just a sentence to describe this, sentence to describe that sentence. And now I'm writing it full script, and I am on page 2, and it's 15 pages. You know, so you know, I think I'm getting a little bit better. I kind of like full script, but I also told Oscar and Tonic, well, you know, we're co-creators. We're gonna, if you want to change something, let's talk about it.
Sound Graver, I think you're right when you say short stories. It's exactly what I'm doing with Fade to Blue, because the stories for Fade to Blue are in 8-page chapters. So you got 3 8-page chapters per book. But I thought to myself, after a while, I might just put out, you know, if it's going to be digital and it's going to be something that we do on a consistent basis, I might just put out in chapter after chapter after chapter. And so you get short 8-page chapter that you're going to read and then come back and read the next 8-page chapter. To me, basically, if you go back to something like the old gold key versions of Star Trek, that's exactly what they did, right? They mimicked the format of the show so that they had breaks, and they did it so perfectly that, you know, in these 6 to 8 page breaks, I could actually hear in my mind the Star Trek music as it would crescendo right before they put on a commercial, right? And those are the kinds of things that, short stories. I want to get into telling short stories again with the whole webcomic. If I go that way, it's going to be short story and just connection of different characters in short stories. So yeah, I
How
agree.
do you feel about, a story over multiple issues?
Well, again, that's my whole thing is that I write in long format, but the thing is that I got to learn to write in long format over short stories. So you got a story arc that's going over multiple issues, no problem. But the thing is that you can contain a larger story arc with smaller stories. Like my thought, quite honestly, when you say that, is like the old Hulk stories from the early 80s. Before you got Byrne or anybody else doing, or McFarlane or anybody. They were very, very short stories, and you would see a character development within Hulk and Hulk's world, even though there were very, very disjointed numbers of stories, because he would just wake up in the middle of nowhere all of a sudden, right? So yeah.
Just jump to a whole new setting,
Yep.
Yeah, I see. I think it's a big ask to say, like, okay, here's my $10 comic book, and then you'll get part 2 in 8 months, 9 months, 10 months, if everything goes well, maybe a year for, and then after 4 issues, you paid $40 in 3 years to get a story. I mean, I'm not Tolkien, so I just want to give everybody, each comic will be complete, and if I have a bigger story, I'll put more pages in that comic. But like you said, after 10 issues, you'll notice that it's going someplace. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like Marvel used to do.
Sound Engraver says, it's Fade to Blue manga style. No, it isn't. You're looking at a panel right here from Fade to Blue. I got a couple of panels that I'll put up in the background for Fade to Blue, but it's very much
noir.
Yes, it's a film noir, but almost, we'll say, very early style comics, in the fact that we're in the 1930s. So I'm going back to black and white, and there might be some blue in it because it's Fade to Blue, but we're going with mostly black and white, and it's very, very early looking American comics is what it looks like. So
yeah, I saw a couple of panels that I forget your artist's name, but the architecture he draws is so cool.
Oh yeah, see if I have that one here. I have it right here. Let me show it.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking about.
Yeah, see, I literally said to him, here's a picture of St. Patrick's in New York, because this is in New York. Well, he's in New York at this point. So he said, yep, I can do that. And he literally recreated on this page the main entrance to St. Patrick's as it was in the 1930s.
Yeah. With Nicolas Cage coming out over there on the left.
That's my character again. I always say I'll use actors, but he's I can never remember his name off the top of my head. But the guy who played Pa Kent within the first Christopher Reeve Superman. So
okay. Yeah, he's got a great classic face, and I can't remember his name. So somebody asked me who would I cast as the patriarch, and John Hamm is who I picture. John Hamm with a beard. Work him out. He's got that classic old school 40s face. John Hamm really, I'm surprised he's popular, because he doesn't have a modern face. He has like an old 40s face.
That's one of the things I always say about the reason why AI can't actually do things correctly when it comes to art, is because if you look at older art, to me anyways, the European face within the 1930s has a completely different style to it, just because of the stock of people, than it does today. And AI can't figure that out. I can figure it out.
Old photographs, and you're just like, this is from the 40s. This is from, yeah. Styles of faces are they go into fashion, like women had different faces. Like in the 50s, like I keep thinking of like Dawn Wells or Marilyn Monroe. They had like a fuller, rounder face, and you don't see that shape of face anymore. Like what, people keep asking me, if you could go back in time, where would you go? And I'm like, the only answer is like the late 40s, after the war, and you just like put on a sailor's uniform, just come walking through Times Square, just pretend you're, came back from the war. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it. It's too. And then just get a job, marry some girl that looks like Dawn Wells, or these beautiful women, and then you already know who's going to win the the elections and the sports and stuff like that, and just make a living betting and buying the perfect stocks. That's the only answer. You're not going to go to Sumeria. You can't understand the language. You're going to die. You're going to give everybody a disease, or you're going to get a disease. Yeah, Zach 10 says, I already have the costume. Yeah, I don't have the physique to play the patriarch.
I would love to go back to this time in history, John, just for the clothes itself. I mean, that's the way I want to dress. It's like, that's the way I want to dress.
Yeah, I want to go to work with a hat, get my attaché case, a tie, have my wife in the blue skirt with an apron, and when she kisses me, one leg goes up. Yeah. It's funny, I keep trying to think of a story, but I can't come up with, like, I could think of a setting, but I can't come up with this of a guy who has a time machine in his basement. And in the basement, so he's in 2024, and then he goes down into the basement and he activates the time machine and he goes through it, and it's like 1956 on the other side of the portal, and that's where his wife and family and everything like that is. And as far as he knows, he goes to work, but he goes to the future. So like, he's kind of like bringing back scientific stuff and cheating. Maybe he's a songwriter who's like writing Beatles tunes before the Beatles. Yeah, I want to hold your hand, or jingles or something like that. But I just picture him as like a stock trader or something. He just goes back to 2024, reads old newspapers, comes back. But that's not a story. That's just a premise.
If somebody was guessing Henry Fonda, but no, it's Glenn Ford. Glenn Ford,
yes.
So that's the actor who plays Pa Kent within Superman the movie, and he also I always plug what the heck is the name of the movie? Oh yeah, 310 to Yuma. He played the original 310 to Yuma. That was an amazing movie.
He has such a masculine, but like not handsome, but not ugly, but like a masculine face. Glenn Ford. Yeah, that's right.
Well, Ryan, I can answer this question right now. If I had a team of 20 superheroes, would I introduce them in a huge battle in the first book? Yeah, that's what I did. That's literally what I did.
I originally wrote World Building the comic, Heroic Tales. Like, I didn't call it the Patriarch because when I started this idea for a comic book, the Patriarch was just one of a million superheroes that I want to introduce in my world. So literally the first issue was just like, look how cool my idea is. Here's everything. Just buckets and buckets of characters just for and people like, I don't care about any of this. It's like, oh yeah, I like that guy on YouTube. And then you get his comic book and it's the similarity. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm not interested in it. So I scaled it all back. So I did the opposite, introducing you to one character. Hope you like him. Hope you like it. But I have like 3 super teams. And each team has like 5 or 6 heroes. I got a million bad guys, and I just have limited funds and limited time because I want Renzo to draw all Heroic Tales, And then one day, just as a conversation, I came up with Eddie is Doomed, and there's literally another 20. There's 10 superheroes and Golden Age versions and Silver Age versions, and then there's 10 bad guys with Golden Age versions and Silver Age versions. So that's a million characters, But that's the whole premise of that. It's supposed to be a goof on Crisis and Infinite Earths.
Well, for me, I'm introducing a world. So, for each book, there's a whole bunch of characters, but it's the fact that this is a built out world that exists. So, dive into it. But if you always wonder who the character is that you want to focus on, it's the one that's going to pull at your heartstrings. So,
and all of your comics are set in the same world, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Because me and RJ are more similar than not, because in Heroic Tale, even Eddie is Doomed. Eddie, the main character, is set in Heroic Tales, but in 1986. So I'm too anal retentive. There has to be a connection. It doesn't matter if you don't get the connection, but so everything is set in the same world. Like the comics that Eddie reads are the comics that the Patriarch's children read. So how prevalent are superpowered people in your world, RJ?
Not at all. No, that's one of the things that I'll probably get into in a little while, because my city that I focused on for Thomas Valiant, it's basically a combination. There's a warp, basically a reality warp that fuse two cities together. One of them would be Gotham or old London, and the other is New York. But that's basically where most of the superheroes are, and in the rest of the world, they're like, that doesn't really exist. People are just making that up, or doing it on television, or they don't really believe that these things exist outside of the larger centers.
Yeah. If superheroes are common, then they lose their specialness. So there's not a lot of. I have a lot of superheroes, but there's what 9-10 billion people on the planet. So I would probably put it at less than 5,000 superpowered beings on my Earth at any given time. And the vast majority of them have powers that aren't flashy, and they just go about their life. Like I'm telekinetic, but I can only lift like 3 ounces. You know what I mean? And he doesn't have the wherewithal or the skills to train it to make it into a real superpower. So, like I think about that, like in Dungeons and Dragons, all the wizards magic. Like, why would wizards spend all their time making combat magic? Wouldn't they make like practical, like a spell to clean their house, or like invisible maid, and that instead of what I mean, and this force just cleans the house and cooks food or copies documents, what I mean? Like fireball.
So basically technology. Yeah. Technology.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because I hadn't thought of it this way, and I wasn't planning on, you just made me think of a really good side story sort of way of describing Kit Fox, because again, Renzo always wants to draw Kit Fox because he's my version of Batman. He likes Batman and Robin. So but it's kind of the thing where the Kit Fox story is going to. It's the fact that you have this guy, he really doesn't have any powers, so he's a Batman like character. And John and I think a lot alike when we talk about heroes and how their superpowers work. And the thing is that he's not quite a hero because he's focusing on, I want to actually create these things, and I don't know, it's not I want to be heroic, it's that I want to create these new ways of fighting crime that you would get today in a Batman comic, which is super preparedness man and all these kinds of things, right? It's like, who would do that? No one would do that. It would be, I want to be heroic, and it will, all the other things will just come up. What's John sharing with me here?
This is Renzo, the pencils and inks for the cover for Heroic Tales #2. So it's being colored by Daniel De La Silva Rodriguez as we speak, and then I'll have the cover dress put on it. But that's the title of the Patriarch story is Subterranean Homesick Blues, and that's the subterranean that he's fighting.
That's why he's got mushrooms all over him. Is that a way?
Yeah, so he's covered in mushroom scales and everything, and yeah. So this is there's going to be like an ongoing thing that the Patriarch and their kids, they play Dungeons and Dragons, and they want to play Dungeons and Dragons, but I call it dungeon crawl for legal purpose. Hey, Michael, how you doing? So it's funny, he can't play dungeon crawl because he has to go and take care of business, but it's a dungeon crawl. He's underground. It's dark. You know what I mean? So he did play dungeon crawl, but just not with his kids and in real life and with real danger.
That's one of the things. Now that Michael's in the chat, Michael does Sumerian mythology within his books. Mine is Celtic mythology, which is the background. Basically, in Fade to Blue, that's one of the because this guy, he has some powers, but he's pretty much kicking around and he gets the crap beaten out of him all the time because he's trying to figure out.
Be our guest this week, Michael. Come on in and talk with us.
The thing about Fade to Blue is that it explores the world in the Celtic mythology kind of way, because in my world it's very much sort of, we'll say 1970s DC, where you have these other worlds that are connected, and oh look, underneath this shopping mall is a passageway to another world.
It's funny because I joke that everything you do I do later, and the more I talk to you about your world, I'm like, oh, people are going to take me literally, because I think we read the same comics, we read the same myths. I think we were inspired by the same things. But when you and I were talking off camera once, and I was talking about the nature of superpowers, I was like, oh man. So just remember, I thought of it first, and RJ's copying me. No, but I like this idea of like other worlds, but they're not copies. Like you can't just go over to this Earth and there's RJ and John's Longbox, but instead of a red, I have a blue, sweatshirt on or whatever. You know what I mean? It's like, no. The other worlds are completely different.
That's funny because my other worlds are different. And they're hidden parts of this world. They're not actual like parallel dimensions or anything like that. But I always thought if you remember the show Fringe,
yes,
I said to myself when that was on, because they're going from one world to the other, they could have literally taken that show and separated into two and have two shows going at the same time, one for each world. And to me, they could do that with comics as well. It's like that would be comics would be the medium to do that. And you couldn't do it in a show because the actors would just get exhausted by doing two shows at once. But you could do that within comics. It's like when they came out with X-Men Red and Green and Blue or whatever it was, Red and Blue and Gold. I thought to myself, that's what I would have, in my mind, that's what I would have done with the X-Men if they separated them into two. It was that let's take two different worlds covering the same story with similar characters, but they're different in a certain way so that you're telling the same story from two different perspectives at the same time. To me, that would be the best way that comics could move forward. And if they could tell the same story at the same time with two different artists looking at two different perspectives and, have two different versions of Wolverine and the X-Men and all that kind of stuff. And to me, that would be pure comics, right? That would be pure just schlock of 1980s, tell the story over again. And, that would be beautiful.
I don't know. We got a bunch of people watching, and we're all, some of us like Michael Bancroft are making our own comics, and we all, I think, have different ideas of what would work, what wouldn't work, and how to save comics. And like, I don't know. As I get disheartened, and then a couple of days later, I'm excited again. I don't know. Like, Chuck Dixon is making an AI comic. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I don't pay attention to it. I saw it on Twitter and was like, yeah, okay, whatever. I'm just honestly, I was Chuck Dixon that said it, I do believe, but we want the future of comics. Just make good stories. Just write good stories. I mean, that's why I'm thinking to myself, I got to put out something faster. I got to put out more stories because I've all these ideas and I'm going to forget them quite literally. I can't even write them all down. And because some of the stories right now I've had in my mind for 20 years or more, but I want to get these things out there because it's just writing good stories, and someone's story is going to catch, and someone's story is going to blow up and be the next, Terminator or, something like that, which is going to turn in from a B movie into a franchise that is going to be around for 50 years.
Mike Barron, I asked him, like, how do we save comics? And, and is crowdfunding the future, and he always has that like wry smile, and he just says, we just got to make good stories.
Yep.
We just got to make good stories. And I was like, I felt like a stupid person for even yeah. I mean, how many good comics came out in the 80s during the indie boom that were awesome, but they just failed because they didn't catch on? But I know what he means. If there's enough good stories, the medium will arise again. That doesn't mean your comic or my comic will be the ones, but it's just, like a shotgun approach. Some of them will hit the target if there's enough good stories.
Well, the thing is too that it's like rising tide rises all boats. It's the fact that the more stories out there, the quicker we can get them out there, the more experience you have, the more merit you have, the more merit that you are immersed in as not just a company, but as someone who's writing comics and talking to other people who write comics. And the better comics you see, the better stories you read, the more you want to do a better story. And you play off of other kinds of people and what they're doing. And that's kind of what we do here, is that I'm looking for people that I've never seen before, looking up their stuff, saying, you look like you have a good comic. I want to know what you're doing. Right? Is because everybody has their own thing. Everybody's doing their own thing right now, but it's going to come to a crescendo of we have enough people out there writing good stuff, merit-based stories, that we're going to play off each other and write really the future of comics, honestly. So I am optimistic.
I was talking with Fabrizio Aiello, who does Horace H. Hoover, and Brian Bao, who does Wolf and Batty. Forgive me, I'm going to sneeze. And I asked, oh God, I asked him the same thing about Chuck. But I'm sorry, everybody. I asked him the same thing about Chuck Dixon, and I said, do you think that affects us, like if AI art? And Fabrizio says, yeah, it just means there's going to be like 100,000 new people making comics, and Wolf and Batsy and Brian Bao said, yeah, but there's still only one Wolf and Batsy, and people are going to come to. He goes, look at it this way: you're your own store, I'm my own store, RJ's his own store, Michael Bancroft his own store, with their own comics. You know, and basically he's saying, like, if you like Wolf and Batsy, you got to come to me. You know, so it doesn't matter. I don't know. Like at first I was like, you can't fight it. You know, you don't win fighting against the technology. You know, like, you know, when I first started becoming an electrician, there was like a big fight against battery powered hand tools. Like everything had to have a cord and stuff like that. That didn't last long at all. You know, you're not going to win. You can't fight technology.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Again, it's about AI as well as the fact that I'm here and you're here because, well, I'm here anyways because I love telling stories. I mean, you're not going to get that with AI. I'm sorry, you're just not. Right. You're not going to get that passion there, and it's going to be something that's missing. So, and I've been doing a lot of. I'm going back. You know, I'm stuck in the 80s. Anybody doesn't believe me? Yeah, I'm stuck in the 80s. But I was going back through my old encyclopedia yearbooks, right? Because I still have encyclopedias. And I was reading, I think it was like 1989 yearbook. And they were talking about then the fact that, there was a fellow, I can't remember his name. I read these books a long time ago, but there was also The Closing of the American Mind, which is a great book for university level, but there was also one for basically high school level saying we're losing the ability to read and understand our own history because there's a common language that people need to understand on how to think. And it has to do a lot with stories, but it has to do a lot with just the common ordinary language that we understand story with. Like we understand Bible verses, we understand mythology lore, we understand the same kind of television because, you know, we all have a similar way of interacting with these things within our own history. And we're losing that. We're going to lose the future of our culture because people can't communicate with each other and share stories.
You know what I read an article. This infuriated me. I read an article where some college professor, I don't remember who or when, like I think I just shunted this information from my brain, was saying that they should start rewriting all books written before 1970 so modern college kids could understand them. Now, is that just an insult to the intelligence of humanity? You know,
because literally I won't buy anything. Like I'm looking for dictionaries. I'm not going to buy one before 1950 or you know, because I collect dictionaries.
I collect old dictionaries. This was before I even met RJ. I was like, you do that too? You know, I'd like to see how words they change words. But like I just read Frankenstein and Dracula, you know, and you know, I read Doc Savage now, written in the 30s, you know. Like you telling me kids in college they can't understand a book written in the 60s? Then college, you're failing. Public school system, you're failing. You know, you're not I bet you there's homeschool kids that could read you know, the grapes of wrath, you know what I mean, and appreciate it, you know.
Honestly, so I was thinking about this morning, John, because I was going to post this on my Twitter and I didn't. I'll probably do it tomorrow. But it's like Psalm 34. I ran across a line in Psalm 34 where it says, what is it? The defeat of an evil man is vice. And I thought to myself, there's the trope. There's the trope for every villain in story for the last, 1,000 years. This is where the tropes come from. And, Shakespeare, the Bible, mythology, if it's, the Oresteia or whatever else we got, the Iliad and the Odyssey, these are where the tropes come from. And they're just laid out bare for you to see. And if you don't go back to those things and understand them as they're supposed to be understood, how are you going to understand why there's a difference between a hero and a villain today? Stuff like that,
Yeah. Every guys at work, they're all excited. John's making a comic. It's so cool. It's so funny. So a couple of guys are like, actually went and checked out comics because reminded them that they used to love comics. So I'm talking like 50-year-old men going to a comic book store for the first time, and they're just like, John, they're all gay. I'm like, yeah. Why do you think I'm making my own comic? And he's like, yeah. How much did you spend? So he goes, I left. He said the art looked like coloring book art. So they didn't even get to the stories. You know what I mean? They would just like pick it up a comic. It's like $6 for this. Yeah.
Yeah. No, honestly, that's the thing. Kind of what I'm talking about is the fact that we share a common language. And I think a lot of people here in the chat share that language with us at the very least to some extent. But you walk into a comic store, you're not speaking the same language as the people in there anymore. You're just not.
And I hate to sound like old in my day, but do you think back when there was only like 7 channels, we all watched MASH, we all watched All in the Family? Like,
yeah,
did that bind us as a people?
Yeah, it did. That's exactly what I mean. It did bind us together as a people. And quite honestly, that's probably the future, if you ask me, because nationalism is coming back. So it's going to be, what does my nation produce anymore? And it's going to be stories of your country again, and the stories we tell about ourselves. Because I can remember, like, before the news on every night, it changed after a while, but there was MASH and Three's Company. And then because before that it was All in the Family, right? And you just watch these over and over again. That's what we got to watch before our parents watched the news, right?
Yeah, guys my age and stuff. I at work I could just go, "Hey Norton, we're going bowling," but we're not going bowling. And they all know exactly what I'm talking about. They all laugh and they'll quote the next line. You know what I mean? Like nowadays, it's like I don't even know how to watch TV. If my wife was to leave me, I wouldn't even know how to operate my television. I don't know what channel. People like, oh, have you heard this new show? It's great. And it's like, oh my God, it's like Anthony Hopkins, and these are quality actors. It's like, what channel is it on? It's on the Oatmeal Network. I'm like, there's another network. Like there's just like a wealth of riches. Like to the point it became too much, and I stopped watching TV because I have an addictive personality, and I'm like, I want to watch all the great shows. I want to watch this. This show's great. That show's great. And now I think I got overstimulated and I shut down.
No, I understand that completely, because that's what happened with me. I just gave up on television at one point. It's just like, yeah, I'm not doing this anymore. Oh, let's see here. John has
more Renzo. You said Renzo likes Batman. So this is my Batman homage. This is the Raven. And if Oscar's still in the chat, he could tell you I went full circle with this. I was like, because in my role-playing games, this is a non-player character that just because sometimes you're going to think less of us. Sometimes my players want to play villains, so this is one of the guys that scares them. Like they're going to get uppity, while the Raven is going to come and bash your face in. So like he's an object of terror in my games. He Batman, because he's like Batman and the Punisher. Like he realized long ago that if you just beat up a mugger in the street, the cops don't arrest him. The cops show up, you're not there. The mugger just goes, yeah, I was walking down the street and somebody assaulted me. You know what I mean? Maybe nowadays with cameras and stuff like that. So he just got frustrated of these guys going for. So he's just like, all right, you're not going to jail, but you're never walking again. And he'll just smash your kneecaps, break your elbows and stuff like that. You're like, I guess my crime career is over, So he's kind of a psychopath. But anyway, when I want to introduce him in issue 3 of Heroic Tales, and I'm like, there's too many people named the Raven. Yes, they're all different. This is not the same Raven as Teen Titans. So I changed him to something else, and then I changed him to something else, and I actually got art done with them and everything like that. And then Oscar goes, John, just trust yourself. Nobody's going to get confused. Just go with your gut instincts. So he's back to square one. So Renzo is chomping at the bit to do this story. When you said Kid Fox, I said I got to find this because Renzo loves Batman.
He does. When we were designing Kid Fox, it was like I put it was basically a combination of Batman and Wolverine, and so on the fringes of his cape, I don't know if you noticed, but am I not there? Hello.
Did you lose me, or did we lose you?
I don't know. I think I think I might have lost you. I don't know. But when I was doing the character development for Kit Fox, I said, let's take basically the fringes of Kit Fox's cape and turn them into knives, right? And Renzo was just like, oh yes, let's do that. Like, he loves character design, especially if you're going in the direction of Batman.
You know, I'm so lucky to be working with such talented people. Zach Dead says playing evil characters makes you evil in real life. I must point out that when my friends made the evil characters, they were more bumbling morons. You know, they weren't like serial killers, stuff like that. They were like, let's rob the bank, you know, and then they went along with all the tropes. Like if they defeated the superhero, they didn't kill him. They were like, let's tie him up and put him in a really, 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 really slow machine and dip him in acid. Oh, we must leave now. Like they played up the part of incompetent villains. It was actually fun, you know, and then they would get beat up and thrown in jail, and then they couldn't use those characters again. So like, you know, it was, you know, one of my friends played a really disturbing bad guy, and I'm like, no, we're not going back to that. You know, we were 14 years old, and I'm like, no, we're not doing this again. Yes.
I always say, talking about Saturday morning cartoons, whenever I hear Darkseid speak, it's always in the Super Friends Darkseid voice.
Yeah. I always picture if you know, I know they use CGI in the movie, but if they did like a live action Darkseid, Robert Duvall would be Darkseid. You know, he just paint them blue and put some craggy lines on them, you know. Have his eyes turn red. I thought the Punisher came after Batman. Yes, Batman came out in 1939, and the Punisher came out in 1974.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
All right, I think we better wrap it up, John. It's almost an hour and a half that we've been talking here, and I know you got to get to work tomorrow. So I want to thank everybody for showing up in the chat. We had almost 30 people here in the chat. And thank you to everybody who's going to watch this video, because usually we get about 500 views on these videos. So people do tune in. So thank you very much to everyone to listen to us drone on about comics and entertainment tonight, and what's partly we're going to do within 2025 within both of our universes, which is what we're talking about. And we will be, I think, on John's
next week, and I'll get a guest. Okay, can I just, so because this is titled what are we doing? So I got Heroic Tales coming out maybe in a month. Well, the campaign maybe in a month, and then a couple months after that, I'd like to launch Eddie is Doomed, and then I would like to do a historical mythological, like I want to take a historical character and blend in all the mythological stories about this his you know, and I want it to be like totally serious and totally like if you know 20 years from now they're going to be like, that comic, that was the one they remember him by. So I'm excited for that, and I'm being purposely vague because I'm doing the research on it, and I don't want other people to steal the ideas, because I think the idea is that good. So those are the 3 projects that I'm doing, and I was thinking of doing a short 10-page Patriarch special where he sees crop circles, you know, messing with, you know, he owns a vineyard that he Patriarch owns legit businesses, and then he uses the money for charity organizations, stuff like that. So he sees like crop circles, and I know a vineyard is different, so maybe I'll change it to hops for beer. And then I was thinking of having a limited edition bottle of wine to sell with the comic. So you get a comic book at a Patriarch vineyard. You know, I was talking with a local vineyard about doing that, but that would be expensive. So I'm just bringing that up to see if there's any interest in anything like that. So far, people are like, yeah, I like the comic book, but I don't drink. You know. So
well, I guess I should do that as well. To list the things that I'm planning to do for 2025. First of all, we got to get Crom the Destroyer out. We're working on getting that done. Honestly, guys, we're doing as quickly as we can. But like you, John, I honestly think to myself, this will probably be the best Conan type story that's going to come out in the year that it comes out, because the artists are working on it. It's so
you
phenomenal.
got 2 great artists on it. It looks great. You
so
got 2 great artists and an okay writer. So yeah, it looks.
Yes, indeed. So you got to work to get that out. Fade to Blue should be coming out digitally pretty soon. I'm not entirely sure again what exactly I'm going to do digitally in order to publish it. After that, we have Thomas Valley #2. We are almost halfway done of that, and during the later half of the year, we're going to hopefully, depending on how far we get within the manga, which is Artemis, that'll be coming out later this year. Also have an idea for a webcomic, which might come out, and another floppy, which is for basically a conflict between Cardinal, which is one of my characters, and a new character, which is a Typhoid Mary type character called Drama. And I want to do a floppy with that. Whether or not that'll come out this year or not depends on whether or not I can find the correct artist to do it. So those are my plans for 2025.
Yeah, 2 busy years for both of us. It sounds exciting.
All right. Well, I want to leave everybody with, again, since we're doing this very informal today, I'm just going to leave it. I'm not going to play my second trailer, and we'll just end the stream and say thank you very much for everybody for showing up.
Thanks a lot, everybody.
All right. I'll see y'all later.
Always enjoy talking to you, RJ.